Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today is date November 30th, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast. That means we do try to watch our language. However, words do fly. As best as we try, but words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So we are almost into December. And with that being said, I say almost because almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, that we do have some news of the week. And this first bit of news, a long time coming, and yet we're wondering where the base of it is. It seems that the Ways and Means Committee of the House has finally got a hold of Trump's tax returns. It only took basically his entire first term.
The House Ways and Means Committee apparently now has former President Trump's tax returns, several years of them, after years of fighting to get them. The committee not immediately returning a request for comment, but this is a significant step coming not too long after the Supreme Court said no to the former president's push to block the release of his taxes to Democrats. Keep in mind, Republicans will take over the House next year, so this was kind of Dems' last chance to get their hands on these returns. The Treasury spokesperson confirming they've complied with the request from House Oversight. Unlike other recent presidents, actually every president in modern history, former President Trump did not make his tax returns public when he ran. He said he'd been audited by the IRS. He's also said that people just don't care. Voters don't care.
Well, to a certain extent, he would kind of be right at this point. As they said, the new 118th Congress gets sworn in January of next year. We have already known that the Republicans will take the House. Democrats will retain the Senate. And we also know when it comes to the House, they do launch more investigations than the Senate does. So for a lot of people wondering, what does this actually mean? Well, this means in the sense that we finally get to have the answers that we should have had since Jump Street. Has Trump basically been cheating the IRS? Has he been a fraud? Has he been a con man? Most of these questions we already got answers to as far as who and what he is. It's just a simple fact of the matter is like, okay, now that you have these tax returns, what's going to be done about it? Well, a lot of people are going to be sitting there wondering, like, well, it's kind of a lame duck. You can't do anything in the office. But at the same time, there was a lot of campaign finance issues that were there. There was a lot of issues with situations where that he wasn't running the Trump Foundation, but there was allegations that he still was. So in all things, when it comes to con men and their operations, you must follow the money. Now, does it mean we'll get anything significant from this? Probably not. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, they still could go after him, even though he's no longer a failure in chief. But at this point, as the journalist has pointed out, this is a last-ditch effort, just because come January, the Republicans will basically be running the House, which is a scary thought considering the fact that they haven't had any plans put together. They are simply going to run investigations on the dumbest. Let's just be honest with you. It's going to be some dumbass investigations that are going to be run by the Republicans. They will not have any plans, and there are going to be a lot of pissed off people wondering why they voted conservative in the first place. Let's just be honest about that. But again, I'm not surprised with this because Trump's not only in the news for that, he's also in the news for having certain people at his Mar-a-Lago residence that will make you wonder, is Trump a racist? If you're wondering, the answer is yes.
Facing growing backlash tonight to his dinner last week with prominent white nationalist Nick Fuentes at his private Mar-a-Lago club. Some of the strongest condemnation coming from his former vice president.
President Trump was wrong to give a white nationalist, an anti-Semite, and a Holocaust denier a seat at the table. And I think he should apologize.
Republican politicians and Jewish groups now among those calling out the former president.
This is something which degrades him, frankly, to do what he's done, and is something which diminishes the country as well. It's very unfortunate.
I mean, yes, it's appalling. Yes, it's unconscionable. And yes, it's entirely in character for Donald Trump.
The Holocaust-denying podcaster Fuentes arriving at Mar-a-Lago as a guest of rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, himself engulfed in controversy for past anti-Semitic remarks. West describing their dinner with Mr. Trump in this since-deleted Twitter video.
So Trump is really impressed with Nick Fuentes. And Nick Fuentes, unlike so many of the lawyers and so many people that he was left with on his 2020 campaign.
In a series of social media posts, Mr. Trump denied knowing Fuentes and said he used the dinner to advise West to stay out of politics. All of this an unwelcome distraction for Republicans looking to rally around their Senate candidate Herschel Walker, facing off against Democratic incumbent Raphael Warnock in that runoff in Georgia. More than 180,000 people have already voted ahead of next.
Okay, so again, not surprised with the former failure in chief, who has already announced that he wants to run in 2024, depending on whether or not he's still as a free man. But it is amazing to me that you invite somebody who is a known Holocaust denier, who is a white nationalist, and then you invite Kanye West. What more can be said about Kanye West that has already been said amongst everybody, including the court of public opinion? Yes, this is the former failure in chief who still has a grand following, who still can somehow, if again, he stays out of jail amongst his multiple lawsuits, if he manages to stay out of jail until 2024, there's a more than likely chance he's going to run. This is not surprising. What is scary is the fact of who he aligned himself with, which again, it amazes me so that people forget that he aligned himself with Steve Bannon, also known as a white nationalist. Let's not forget his entire cabinet, which for the most of them, except for two people, were not indicted, fired, or had to resign from the post. Well, 3 if you count Kellyanne Conway, but when you have Con in your name, that kind of tells you exactly what she's about. But it's not surprising that Trump right now is really in a lot of hot water. But it is amazing how the conservative group out there, the GOP, has turned their backs on him. Remember when the GOP used to all be about Trump? We're behind him. He's our president. We voted for him. He won. Deal with it. Remember those people? Yeah, they are now turning on him and saying, "Oh, we don't talk about Trump no more." It's almost like we don't talk about Bruno except replace that with Trump. It's amazing to watch how the GOP just turns on each other so very quickly. But again, if Trump still manages to stay out of jail until 2024, there is a definite chance he'll run. What is also scary, people will still vote for him. That alone speaks volumes. But another thing that speaks volumes, guys, again, as you heard from the previous journalist, we are talking about the Senate runoff race in Georgia between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker, a man who has never served in any office, a man who is the shining example of CTE, a man who has lied about being a federal law enforcement officer, lied about graduating top of his class at the University of Georgia, denied abortions, yet he has been found to have paid for several abortions by many women coming forward. Says he has run a successful business that no one can seem to find. And just in case you needed more reason not to believe that this man should not be in Senate, apparently he's a resident of Texas. Keep in mind, he's running for Senate office in Georgia.
Tonight, exactly 1 week before the Georgia Senate runoff election, Republican candidate Herschel Walker is on defense again, this time about whether he legally resides in the state of Georgia. CNN's K-File reporting tonight that Walker himself earlier this year said, quote, "I live in Texas." And he also said this.
I was sitting in my home in Texas, and I was seeing what was going on in this country.
But during a campaign rally just hours ago, Walker claimed that he's always been a Georgia resident.
I represent the great people of Georgia. I've lived here my whole life.
Walker has been under fire over this already, fending off questions about his residency after CNN's K-File reported that Walker was getting a Texas tax break intended for a primary residence. Out front now, Chris Eliza, CNN politics reporter and editor-at-large. For more on this, so Chris, this is not clearly the first controversy that Herschel Walker has been dealing with since launching his campaign for Senate. This is a new problem. This new problem, how does it stack up against all of the others that he's?
Well, let me first say, Kate, that clip you played where Herschel Walker says, "I lived in Georgia my whole life," is just not true, right? I mean, he lived in Texas. He moved to Georgia to run for the Senate, which is fine, but just to do a little bit of a fact check there. So I have two contradictory thoughts on how big an issue it is. On the one hand, as you mentioned, Walker has been through a lot in terms of allegations about paying for abortions, which he denied. The campaign has been hit with a lot throughout the campaign, and he's still standing, right? And there's value in that, politically speaking. On the other hand, we are 7 days away from the runoff, and this is a very close race. So when you talk about those things, Herschel Walker would rather not be talking about his residency issues tonight and tomorrow on the campaign trail. So little things can make a big difference when we're talking about a really close race with really.
So what's real scary about that, guys, is like he said, it's somehow still a close race. How? I'm sorry. This is going to bug me so much, but how? How in the blue hell is it still a close race? The man is getting a tax break for having his primary residence. Keep in mind that apparently in Texas, you get a tax break as a homeowner for being a primary resident. Now, as the CNN journalist did point out, for the simple fact of the matter that there was nothing wrong with him moving to Georgia and running for office. However, it looks mighty shady as shit that you're calling yourself a Georgia resident, but you're also in Texas. But what's also messed up about this is that he still can beat Raphael Warnock. Not just because of the fact that he's been caught lying, not because of the fact that he's not very suave on politics, not on the fact that he's on top of current events, but for the simple fact of the matter is there's a certain group of Mayo people out there that just want to vote for him because he's conservative. I have yet to figure out. I'm trying my hardest. I have yet to figure out. That is, to me, is the greatest experiment research, because I truly believe for those that vote conservative, I have to ask this all the time: how and why? Because if you vote conservative, but you're still complaining about the way things are, but you vote conservative, that's shooting yourself in the foot and reloading and then wondering why you have a hole in your foot, because you're basically voting in the same people who are screwing you over. So when you look at Herschel Walker as it is, it's like, do you honestly think this man is going to improve the conditions of your neighborhood, your town, your city, much less your state? I mean, this is the same guy who at a political news conference decided to have a conversation about werewolves, and he had a conversation about werewolves and vampires. A political conversation that went into Dungeons and Dragons by somebody who has no business being in court, being in politics. But as I said before, if you are a certain demographic type and you're for the GOP, somehow you get enough people to believe in you to the point to where it's borderline lunacy. And that's what's happening with Herschel Walker right now. That you think between Warnock and Walker, this should be a no-brainer. No, it is still a close fucking race. And it mystifies me how we're still there. It truly, truly, truly mystifies me that there is a scary thought that Herschel Walker could literally and figuratively become the second black senator of Georgia. And as much as I love as a trend for African Americans to finally, be in places where representation matters, I hate to say this ain't it, especially with him. But moving right along, guys. There was some things that were done in the House. The first one, you guys heard me talk about the railroad strike, because some months ago there was a threat that railroad workers and the United the UAW labor union were actually about to have a strike. And trust me, the last thing you want when you're a retail or commercial business or even a small business, because the trade yards and railroads, they move a lot of product. And let's be honest, considering it's that big Christmas time, Black Friday has passed, Cyber Monday has passed, folks are still trying to get deals for the holiday season. You want everything to be moving swimmingly. You do not want, above all else, the railway systems to come to a complete halt. Because if you do, you will get what happened just a couple months ago. Store shelves were almost blank. Prices on things went up. Things were a little bit harder to get. And the reason why I bring this up, guys, because again, we're around the holiday season. Not just the fact of buying gifts and things of that nature. It's the fact of the matter that, essential things like groceries, like produce, toilet paper, things of that nature, that stuff can become real scarce if unions are not actually treated equally. Well, Congress has had something to do about that. So let's see what Biden and company have done so far.
Tonight, celebrating the lighting of the national Christmas tree, but it's the threat of a looming railroad strike that could still complicate the holidays for Americans. A strike that could occur as early as next Friday could cost the economy more than $500 million in its first week alone, according to one estimate.
Let me be clear, a nationwide rail shutdown would be catastrophic.
The House today with a bipartisan vote to avert a work stoppage, approving legislation that would force the rail companies and their workers to accept an agreement the White House helped broker earlier this year, giving rail unions a 24% pay raise over 5 years. But several of the unions rejected that deal because it failed to provide enough paid sick leave. The question now, will it get derailed in the Senate? Retailers and manufacturers are already racing to find alternate ways to move their products. Everything from chlorine for safe drinking water to clothes.
Preparations are already in place, a week or more out for the rail service. They're already having to find workarounds. That uncertainty is really poison for being able to plan in any sort of real way.
Some Senate Republicans arguing Washington should stay out of it.
Why should the federal government force a contract on workers that they have explicitly rejected?
And several Senate Democrats are demanding more paid sick leave.
Mr. Secretary, how critical is it that the Senate approves this deal now?
It is critical. Look, the U.S. transportation system has no substitute for well-functioning freight rail. This is not a time when we can afford to have a lot of maneuvers, any kind of politics introduced here.
And Peter, I guess you could say the president isn't just pushing the Senate to act, but to act fast.
Yeah, Lester, the president says he wants that bill on his desk by the end of this week. While December 9th is the official cutoff for a strike, President Biden is now warning without taking action before then, the impact on Americans could be felt as early as.
Okay, so they said a strike could happen as soon as next Friday. Two things I want to point out here. It is amazing how Republicans always sit there and say, well, the government shouldn't be involved in the affairs between the businesses and their workers. Aren't y'all the same motherfuckers that have no problem telling a woman what they should do with their bodies as long as you listen to them? Weren't y'all the ones championing the fact of abortion? Weren't y'all the same ones that were championing the fact of Roe versus Wade being struck down, and that how so many GOP-controlled states had trigger laws to go into effect to ban abortion outright in some areas? Weren't y'all the same group that had no problem talking about we're protecting life? And yet, when it comes to the fact of railroad workers and companies, that Biden company decided in the House to pass a bill to force the labor unions to accept a plan drafted by the White House not too long ago that gives union workers 24% of a pay raise for the next 5 years, but the problem is paid sick leave. You think it would be a no-brainer to the companies to which those labor unions actually work with. But I do think it's a bad move to sit there and put in a bill to force labor unions to accept the plan, simply put, because the White House had a hand in crafting the pay raises. This is why I sit there and say, folks, when it comes to jobs, things of that nature, paid sick leave, maternity, paternity leave, those things matter because a lot of people, especially this pandemic, from working remote home and working everywhere have realized, and companies have realized, you're going to have to be a little bit more flexible. And for the simple fact of the matter is that if you're working in an area that affects a lot of people, vis-a-vis a railroad union yard to where a lot of product gets moved, yes, you should be listening to your workers. For without them, you'd have a problem. Imagine if every worker at an Amazon location, several locations in fact, all decide to walk out. Amazon would lose billions in a single day. The same thing can happen next Friday if these union demands aren't met. But I still say being pro-union matters, just because a lot of people sit there and go, well, it's just paid sick leave. Well, when you're sick and you can't work, so you'd have to make a choice to go in and work yourself to death or miss a day out, which means missing a day's pay. And let's also be honest about this. Everything's going up but your paycheck. Yes, I mean, a lot of people have taken on double jobs. A lot of people are taking on side gigs. Some people are doing DoorDash, Uber, Amazon, you name it. But that just screams the problem of the income and paid leave issue that we do have in this country. And this is why I keep saying unions are important, because unions will fight for it. And if we're being completely honest here, every time a union has went on strike this year, they've actually gotten what they wanted. So if I was the companies of those yards where product could sit there for days on end, you may want to give them what they want if paid sick leave is the only thing they want. Seems like a small price to pay. That's all I'm saying. But other news we do have, guys, especially in the Senate. Of course, we did know that in the House, Nancy Pelosi will resign. She will not be the House. She will not be the House Speaker in this case. However, the Democrats have elected their House Minority Speaker. The Democrats have elected their House Minority Speaker, and kind of surprised this actually happened, but it's a first. A black man will now be leading a body of Congress leading one of the houses of Congress. Of course, you don't know who he is, Richard Jeffries.
Democrats have elected Hakeem Jeffries to be their leader when they take the minority in the next Congress. He makes history, becoming the first black man to lead a political party's caucus in either chamber. Back with us is NBC's Ali Vitale. Ali, talk to us about the significance of this moment and the challenges ahead.
Well, look, when I spent time with Hakeem Jeffries last night, it was the eve of his ascension into this historic leadership role. But he said to us that he didn't have much time to reflect on what it meant to be the first black person elevated and elected to this position in Congress. Instead, he was focused on the road ahead. Now, I'll tell you that usually these leadership elections can have a little bit of drama to them. Certainly, we're seeing that now on the Republican side, and we'll continue to see that play out through January 3rd when Kevin McCarthy puts himself up for Speaker of the House. But in terms of Democratic leadership, I thought that Gregory Meeks put it well in the room. Our sources telling us that he delivered a powerful speech that had the entire Democratic caucus on their feet just ahead of Jeffries' official election. And what Meeks said was the most important part of a relay race is how you pass the baton. That's something that for Jeffries, Aguilar, and Clark, who are going to make up this new trio of leadership for House Democrats, the baton passing was pretty much without fanfare. The caucus had decided that these were the three people, the new generation of leadership, that was going to lead them into this next phase for Democrats on the Hill. In the minority position, something that Jeffries said should be a uniting factor for Democrats as they try to counter Republicans holding the House majority over the course of the next 2 years. But it's also a moment where they are putting Speaker Pelosi in an emerita position as Speaker of the House. Steny Hoyer, the current majority leader, will also still be in the building. It'll be a bit of a balancing act, having these two lawmakers and leaders physically still in the building where Democrats can have access to them, where Jeffries and other members of leadership can still talk to them about strategy, but also a moment where they are fully turning the page here. Jeffries has a different leadership style, most likely, than someone like Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who at times ruled her caucus with an iron fist. Jeffries instead saying to me yesterday, as we had a small group of reporters around a table, saying that everyone in the Democratic Party has a role to play when they have the right position on the field, very much leading with a team first mentality.
with a team first mentality. Well, and apologize. Hakeem Jeffries is his name. I said Richard Jeffries. Sincerely apologize for that. I do love it. History has been made. He'll be leading the House. He'll be actually House leadership. House leadership, minority leader for the House of Representatives. And yes, it's a first. The thing that bothers me a little bit is that with Pelosi was a moderate. She was a moderate Democrat, which to me was like almost conservative. Now, I have been saying this, that Pelosi, along with Schumer in the Senate, there needs to be a change because as the GOP gets more extreme to the right, that Democrats have to balance this out by being more progressive. Progressive measures actually push the needle forward. Will Hakeem Jeffries do that along with the other trio of the Democratic leadership? Hard to say, considering the fact that the next Congress is going to be basically a Senate full of Democrats, followed by a House full of Republicans, and I have yet to see the Republicans put forth a bill when they're too busy launching investigations that will go nowhere. Time will tell. But historical day indeed. Not only that happened in the Senate actually got something done. Believe it or not, actually the Senate and the House got something done. That they successfully may have codified not only same-sex marriages, but interracial marriages as well.
The Senate voted to protect same-sex marriage in a way that's never been done before.
The bill, as amended, has passed.
Mr. President, what a great day. What a great day.
Notably, the bill titled Respect for Marriage Act passed with support from both sides of the aisle. So why is that important? Well, it enshrines same-sex marriage protections in federal law. Now, the bill did have to be revised to win Republican votes, adding language clarifying some points. So it now heads to the House for a vote, after which it will make its way to President Biden's desk.
So let's stop it right there, because I just want to point this out for a second. This was the actual bill that got passed, the Respect for Marriage Act. It got passed in the Senate, as you heard from the journalist, that it will be going to the House for voting. And if the House votes for it, then it will be on Biden's desk. Now, of course, it does repeal the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act. For all those that don't remember what the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act was, it was really a bullshit act. It was basically an act saying that, marriage is defined as between a man and a woman. That's pretty much it. It was by far the dumbest law ever made top 10 of dumbest laws ever made in the United States. It does enshrine legal same-sex marriage in federal law, which means that any same-sex marriage going forward, of course, previously will not be hindered. They will be recognized as marriage under the Constitution. Of course, would not require a state to issue a marriage license contrary to state law. Now, here's the thing. These two right here is the bullshit ones. This is the ones that got the Republicans to play ball. Keeps all religious liberties and conscience protections under Constitution federal law. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing. Because you know why? Because there's going to be some people out there, sometimes churches, sometimes priests, and things of that nature, who like to think that they will not issue marriage licenses because it violates their faith. I know it sounds stupid, but unfortunately, there are a lot of stupid people who let their faiths dictate what they do for other people who don't believe in the same things they do. Yes, I know it's dumb. The second part, nonprofit religious organizations not required to provide services or celebration of a marriage. You guys remember the gay baker? I won't bake a cake for this couple because it's against my religion. Or that one clerk up in Kentucky who didn't want to issue same-sex marriage licenses because it violates her religion. That part. And again, it is completely stupid. But it is amazing how those two things had to be added for Republicans on the Senate to go along with this bill. But I also say at the same time that for simple fact of the matter, that it should be a no-brainer that we should be protecting women's rights. We should be protecting interracial marriage. We should be protecting same-sex marriages. We should be protecting LGBTQ plus rights. These are all no-brainers. But the problem you're going to have with this is folks are always going to cite religion. And I've always said this beforehand. if you're going to cite religion in a place that has nothing to do with your religion, don't run. Don't run for office. Because if religion is going to be a hindrance for you, go to church. Go run for the church. Go work for the Vatican. Go work for whatever deity or non-corporeal thing you believe in. Go work for them. Because it's always scary to me that those who are guided by their faith are always put in a political office where all they're going to do is what they think is best for other people because they have this sense of being morally superior that it's almost borderline snobbish. And to think that that law, that for that to be codified and hopefully ratified to where it protects people under that stature, they had to bend over backwards to protect the religious people. Because the religious people are always claiming they're being prosecuted when they're not. In no sense of the word. Don't believe me? Wait till we get closer to December, and all of a sudden you're gonna have the war on Christmas. Fun stuff. But moving right along, guys, we did want to cover this one about Department of Justice, of course, over Jackson, Mississippi, the water crisis. It's just like Flint, Michigan. The issue itself is still going on, and because of that, they are still following it, and they have actually did some legal ramifications to where hopefully it helps the residents.
The Justice Department taking action on the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. In a statement, Attorney General Merrick Garland saying, in part, we will continue to prioritize cases in the communities most burdened by environmental harm. Jackson has been plagued by a series of drinking water crises and service outages in recent years, including the city's main water treatment plant failing after heavy rain. In a separate action, the department also announced it filed a proposed order that would appoint a third party to stabilize Jackson's water system. A court granted that order late today. That party would operate the system, take charge of billing customers, and make needed improvements. The DOJ says the city and the Mississippi State Health Department have both signed the order and agreed to its terms. The city has repeatedly said it intends to cooperate. Longtime Jackson resident Brooke Floyd says her family has been boiling water for years.
What do you want to see happen now that the DOJ is involved here?
I want our water to be fixed. I want my children to be able to turn on the faucet and brush their teeth.
Kristen Clark, the head of the DOJ Civil Rights Division, spoke in September about Jackson's water crisis.
We as a nation have a duty to stand up for our nation's most vulnerable. And it is not lost on us that we're talking about a community that is home to a disproportionate number of low-income Black people in Mississippi.
This is the latest in a recent line of DOJ investigations looking into environmental justice issues, like failing sewage systems in Alabama and illegal dumping in Texas. Tonight, one Jackson resident telling us it's time for the city, state, and federal government to step up.
Yeah, and she's not wrong. She's not wrong at all. It's just that when it comes to Flint, Michigan, when it comes to Jackson, Mississippi, and that's just a handful of towns that are having water crises. And to think, in the U.S., we have infrastructure problems. No shit. Only because, and I hate to say this, and I'm going to keep saying it because I've yet to be wrong, whenever it's GOP-controlled states, cities, and towns, the biggest things that are in need of repair are always water systems, sanitation, electrical, internet. That's usually all. Roads, roads, interstates, transportation issues. We can keep going down the line. The thing about it is amazing how long these have gone without proper upkeep or care. And yet we are now seeing the ramifications of what happens when, say, for instance, flash flooding causes a water treatment station to go down. That affects hundreds, if not thousands, of people. So to me, I still sit there and say, just like Flint, Michigan, how in the world can a water crisis of this magnitude happen and not one official has yet to answer for it? Not one person brought up on charges, not one person losing their job, not one person, not getting any penalty or punishment whatsoever. I still want to know, because how in the world are those governments able to still be active and get away with this scot-free, and the only people that are hurt are citizens and their children and generations to come? That is what I truly, truly would like to know above all else. But speaking of things that are, as they keep on turning, if you've gotten a letter regarding your student loan forgiveness, saying it's been approved and whatnot, and then finding out that yes, because conservatives and the banks that pay them are trying to keep them from actually trying to get you to give you some relief, Biden has again kicked the can down the road.
Turning to Washington now, and a major announcement affecting people with student loans. The Biden administration is extending a pause on federal student loan payments. ABC's Em Nguyen is here now with more on that. Em, good morning.
Good morning, Rhiannon. That pause on federal student loan payments began in 2020 to help people struggling during the pandemic. And now the Biden administration is extending that pause for another 6 months as the forgiveness program plays out. Under this extended pause, the first payments won't be due until next summer unless there's a court ruling on the issue. The Justice Department had asked the Supreme Court to step in and reinstate the president's student loan forgiveness program, which was struck down by a lower court in Texas. The program would cancel up to $20,000 in debt for low and middle income borrowers. Now, opponents say the president does not have the power to cancel debt, but President Biden says he is completely confident his plan is legal. Rhiannon.
So what I find interesting of that is because, yes, that's the ruling that came out of Texas, was that a Trump-appointed judge had sat there and said that the president does not have the ability to cancel debt. This is why I say it's a golden opportunity that Democrats missed. Now, the Democrats, you don't have a lot of time left. Like I said, you have less than a month. I am trying to figure out why the Democrats, if the problem is, and this again, this is the ruling that the judge in Texas gave, the president cannot cancel student loan debt. Why in the blue hell has anybody on the Democratic side sat there and said, let's set up a bill to either cancel student debt or to give the president the ability to cancel student debt? I've yet to figure this out. It is amazing to me. This is why I said the Democrats, with their slim majority, really dropped the ball on this. Because to me, if that occurred, and the whole argument, the legal argument, mind you, the whole legal argument is that the president cannot cancel debts. Okay, 2 ways this can have been handled. Submit a bill and say, we are behind giving the president the ability to cancel student loan debt, or we're submitting a bill to cancel student loan debt altogether. You have a slim majority in Congress. But that's the problem with Democrats, that as much as they have good intentions, they're not aligned. Say what you want about the GOP and the fact they're idiocy and the fact they have a Florida man mentality, but when it comes to getting bills passed, they all toe the party line. And that's always been the problem with Democrats. Democrats have had a golden opportunity after golden opportunity after golden opportunity in this slim majority to get a lot of things progressively passed, and yet they were not able to do that. Now, you can blame Kristen Sinema, you can blame Joe Manchin, but when it comes down to it, it's the fact that all Democrats must be held accountable. You had a golden opportunity to not only protect women's rights, not only to increase the minimum wage, not only to protect our voting rights, not only to really do so much more, even finally get gun laws passed. Not that lazy flim-ass gun law that was passed a couple of months ago, that was really catering to Republicans more than it was catering to the general public. The thing about it is the Democrats have had a golden opportunity, and because of the lack of unity, we're not able to get through a lot of bills that really could have changed not only our economy, but our society going forward. And this, again, with student loan debt, I will always sit there and say, if we were able to literally finance 2 wars for nearly 20 years, then we can easily pay the debt of every U.S. citizen. Because let's be honest, that debt to income ratio, the credit score will look a whole lot better if you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay student loans. Because for a lot of people, they're not able to pay off their student loans. Sometimes student loans stick with you until you die, versus those who are lucky enough to pay theirs off or get an inheritance or go down the main list of things that a lot of people don't have, but they did, but swear up and down that everybody else can do the same thing. The point I'm making is the Democrats had a golden opportunity to basically keep this, to win, actually. Oh, and legalize marijuana. You can legalize marijuana in all 50 states. And again, could have guaranteed your control in the House and the Senate. But I digress. But moving along, guys, we just got a couple of cop stories that come out. Specifically, I want to start with this first one because apparently in one specific area, they're having a little bit of a problem, a cop staffing problem. Yes, I didn't think I'd be able to say this. I did not have this on my bingo card of 2022, but yes, in some areas of the country, they are actually having a law enforcement shortage.
Work of the police from big cities to small towns, law enforcement agencies across the country are in a bidding war for new officers, offering bonuses and perks, trying to recruit the next generation of police officers as many lifelong first responders leave the profession in droves. It's leading to significant shortages impacting cities that are already dealing with increases in violent crime. ABC's Jay O'Brien looks into why so many officers are walking away from the job.
All Anthony Carapucci ever wanted to be was a cop. An Afghanistan war veteran, the son of two police officers, public service felt like his calling.
Policing is essentially really all I know. You know, I love the job.
But in September, after almost a decade with the Philadelphia Police Department, he quit.
Thank you for doing this.
And called us after turning in his gun and badge, feeling burnt out.
It was kind of heartbreaking in a sense. I'm not going to lie, you know, because it's really everything that I knew, everything that I loved. Yes, it's a good job. It's an honorable job, but it's almost not worth it.
Philadelphia, like other major American cities, is seeing an exodus of police officers. Los Angeles is down at least 500 cops. New Orleans, more than 300 officers short from a few years ago. And in Wisconsin this year, the entire state reached a record low for police officers. But in the city of brotherly love, Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw is facing a shortage of 600 officers, roughly 10% of the force's full strength, nearly the same number of cops out on disability.
How long until your staffing levels are critical?
It's critical now. It's already critical. It was critical a year ago.
Bracing for a crushing wave of upcoming officer retirements, a city report also found Outlaw's team needs to triple its recruitment over the next 3 years to avoid even worse shortages.
You can only eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? We're going to be realistic about that. And in order, look at those numbers. That took time to get here.
It sounds like you're saying that your numbers of officers, the shortages you face, are going to get worse before they get better.
I think so.
You've had homicides right in this neighborhood.
Right in the corner, yeah.
Jamal Johnson, an anti-violence activist, told us he went from protesting police brutality a few years ago to pleading for more cops on the streets to stop the current surge of violence. Philadelphia saw a record-breaking 562 homicides last year, upwards of 460 people murdered so far this year. At this intersection Johnson walked us to, one man was shot 16 times in October.
We've been out here for half hour, haven't seen a single police officer.
Right. It's not unusual.
That's common.
It's not unusual.
There used to be a police car, locals told us, frequently parked right out front of Nouveau's hair salon, but it hasn't been there for months.
What was the last time you saw a police officer out here?
Last year.
And inside, Kenidra Scott and Taylin Botino say that's when this intersection turned its most dangerous.
When the police were removed from parking out front here, is that when the killing started to pick up on that corner?
Yes, because since last year, all the killings started through the summer till now.
Outlaw says her department is still responding quickly to priority calls like murders and shootings, but patrolling and proactive policing, stopping crimes before they occur, are often some of the first tasks put on pause when a department's ranks dip.
It seems like you're leading a department that's just getting burned out.
I think many of us are. Many of us are.
Across the country.
Across the country. This is not unique to Philadelphia.
A recent survey of law enforcement leaders found over half of agencies in the U.S. have fewer officers than they did 4 or 5 years ago. And nearly 3 out of every 4 departments warned their number of new applicants dropped off significantly over that same period. In Virginia,
Batman, come out now, you're gonna get bit.
At the Fairfax County Criminal Justice Academy,
Boy, buddy.
their numbers have been in steady decline for years.
In 2018, our average class size was in the 50s. Now our average class size starts in the 30s.
This police department's been around since 1940,
and it's never had the vacancy rate that we have now, in spite of us doing more on the recruiting and retention end than we've ever done before.
Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis says exit interviews show officers are leaving because they're not feeling valued and think they can find better opportunities elsewhere.
They're going into IT, they're going into sales, they're teaching. We've even had a person leave to go be a farmer.
Many cops across the country now forced to work punishing mandatory overtime to make up for big shortages, and some discouraged by how they're treated, including hearing phrases like defund the police.
I know that the sentiment behind defund the police is police better, and police better, particularly in Black and brown communities. A 24-year-old cop who hasn't lived very long sees that phrase as a anti-police rhetoric. And it makes them feel a certain way, and it doesn't make them feel very good.
There are those that would say law enforcement's undermined its own credibility. What's your response to that?
But those are the same people that will call 911 and will file a complaint if we don't get there quickly enough.
But in this great resignation, where millions, including cops, are leaving lifelong jobs, the clock is ticking.
Does he pose a threat?
To convince millennials and even Gen Z that police work is worth it.
Examine your heart. Do you want to serve? Do you want to make your community better and your family safer and your neighbors safer and your friends safer?
In Fairfax, because their applicant pool is smaller, the academy is now focused on outreach to the most dedicated of potential recruits, like Mitra Mtiazian. She drives 3 hours both ways every day to attend this academy.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Inspired by the call to serve.
I couldn't see myself doing anything else.
But back in Philadelphia,
I can't imagine being more worried about law enforcement than I am right now.
John Hoyt with the city's police union says the sons and daughters of cops, many of whom used to jump at the chance to enter the family business, now are not.
The problem is those mothers and fathers that are current police officers or retired are saying, don't go into the business.
Right now, Commissioner Outlaw's task, she believes, is to convince the Philadelphia community that policing is still a trusted profession, under pressure to grow her ranks before too many cops leave for good.
I've always been optimistic. Law enforcement has been around for how many years now? I mean,
And you don't think it's going anywhere?
No.
Kind of captivating, ain't it? That's just one spot in Philadelphia. That yes, across the country, words I got lost for a second. Across the country, enrollments into law enforcement are going down, and you've heard the reasons why. Mandatory overtime, and that can cause a lot of burnout. Defund the police. The negative perception, which I love. They say negative perception because you guys have heard me say this on this podcast a lot, where I sit there and say, the problem with policing is that policing needed to be updated. There did come a time where policing needed to have an update. Police reform was needed. We've seen way too many shootings. We have seen way too many deaths that could have been prevented. And yet officers, some of them did see justice. Some of them never saw a day in court. And yes, as the older generations are moving on and the millennials and those after them are starting to take more and more prominence, then yes, not a lot of people are not wanting to become police officers. Not a lot of people are, finding lucrative areas everywhere. So you know what I hear from all that? I hear, number one, police officers are not given the respect they deserve. And that's really a multi-layered problem. I mean, the problem is how you police, especially in areas of minorities, because minorities have had the worst track record with police. I've said it many times on this podcast. Name a Black person out there who doesn't have a police story where they got treated wrong, misidentified, what have you. We've all got a story, maybe even more than one. That's part of it. At the same time, it's just that fact of, pay. Most police officers are not getting paid enough. Most officers are working like I said in the news article, one or too many overtime hours to the point to where they're burned out. And that's the problem you have with a job like that. When a job like that, where you're a first responder, there isn't a lot of care given and pay given to those, to where, if you haven't noticed, like the pandemic we're currently living in, nurses and doctors and hospital staff personnel are also experiencing burnout. That's why you have so many places out here offering nurses programs, doctor programs, accelerated learning, almost damn near paying your education just because they need bodies. Law enforcement is no different. But again, law enforcement in America is only coming to a head because, for the simple fact of the matter, it's one of those monoliths that they believe will always be around. It's too big to fail, not realizing that, yes, it may have taken several decades, but law enforcement enrollment is declining. And how do you fix that? Easy. Like every other job in America, offer higher pay, offer better training, offer more extensiveness. At the same time, actually work with the communities that you say you work with. Because it's amazing to see law enforcement as a deterrent, but what happens when you actually use it in a positive manner? But as long as we keep up with the status quo, unfortunately, you're going to see more and more. You're going to see more and more people pass on being law enforcement officers, especially when you see law enforcement officers who do what this person did, or I should say, these group of officers did to one individual who is now paralyzed because, well, nobody decided to put him in a seatbelt when he got arrested and put in the back of a police van.
It's been over 3 months since Randy Cox was paralyzed, which his family says was caused by a sudden stop in a New Haven police van. He was not wearing a seatbelt.
Today, he had to go be put back in the hospital because he got bed sores. And as Lou Rabano and us discussed, the doctors say this is going to be a regular thing forever.
On Tuesday, attorneys representing Cox filed a federal lawsuit for $100 million against the 5 officers involved in the incident and the city of New Haven. However, Cox's legal team is hoping the city won't let this case go to trial.
And the city has a right to say to this mother, we're not going to put you through all of that.
The mayor and police chief were at Tuesday's announcement. Mayor Justin Elliker says the city is committed to do the right thing.
We need to make sure that we see this process through and do it deliberatively and appropriately.
At some point in time, as happens in almost every civil case, whether sooner rather than later, I can't tell you the particular time here, there will become a time probably when settlement will be discussed.
Mayor Elliker says the state attorney's office is expected to conclude its investigation into the incident by mid-November. Once that is complete, an internal affairs investigation will begin.
I want to see them fired and arrested.
Meanwhile, lawyers say Cox is in and out of the hospital, unable to do anything for himself, and his mental health has also taken a toll.
I am the one that's there most of the time, helping him eat.
He often wakes up in the middle of a dream he's having where he's running or walking. He wakes up realizing that he's paralyzed.
Now imagine for the simple fact of the matter that I just got through talking about why police enrollment is going down. And again, when it's amazing, it says negative perception, things of that nature, where no one can explain how an individual was arrested, put in the back of a police van, and then for some odd reason his seatbelt was not put on, and he is now paralyzed because he was slammed by the impact. Well, those five of those officers in Connecticut were charged with misdemeanors. Yes, misdemeanors. As it says right there in the article for you guys that want to see it, that literally 5 Connecticut police officers were charged with misdemeanors on Monday over their treatment of a black man. Misdemeanors. I cannot stress this enough. So let me get this straight. This man, albeit whatever his charges was put in the back of a squad car. No one seat buckled him. Sudden stop happened. He's now paralyzed. And yet the 5 officers involved are being charged with misdemeanors. How is vehicular homicide not a thing? I'm trying to figure that out. Because you rob somebody of their ability to walk, to run, to take care of themselves. They are now a forced invalid. But 5 officers are charged with misdemeanors. And yet they wonder why police enrollment is at an all-time low. They wonder. But we're going to go on, guys, to our feel-good segment. Usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we do a couple of things that are a lot of doom and gloom. But hey, It's Wednesday, hump day. We just want to get you guys on some good vibrations going into the weekend. And hopefully this story will do just that, of a Native American that is trying to keep food not only organically good, but pretty good eating. And again, I just love to see stories like this.
This holiday season, in a bustling Minneapolis kitchen, a groundbreaking mission gains undeniable momentum.
Okay, let me take a look for you.
The fight for a table at Owamni, named for a waterfall once flowing nearby, validation to a visionary. Meet Sean Sherman, a member of the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe, dubbed the Sioux Chef.
You describe your food as decolonized. What is that?
We're just pushing back on what that colonization brought.
Everything on Owamni's menu grows or grazes in North America and predates European settlers.
We took away things that were introduced, like dairy, wheat flour, cane sugar, beef, pork, chicken. All those items didn't exist here not that long ago.
To Sherman, dishes of bison, beans, corn, even crickets, honor land stolen and a culture crushed.
We're just looking at how indigenous peoples basically around the world had the blueprint to live sustainably, utilizing the world around us.
For co-owner Dana Thompson, it's an homage to resistance, recipes preserved by ancestors who at one time could have been jailed for preparing indigenous food.
You have people that actually are weeping into their plates some days because this is the first time they've had a completely decolonized meal.
Today's customers, mystified.
It was incredible.
I haven't seen most of this stuff before, so it's kind of cool to try duck sausage.
Since opening in 2021, Owamni's success has been staggering, earning an esteemed James Beard Award and Sherman a trip to the White House. Thanksgiving, he notes, is a painful day for Indigenous people.
We're at a point where we can start to reclaim a lot of this, but we're hoping that non-Indigenous peoples can really start to think and pay respect to the land that they're standing on and think about the privileges that some people have.
What better way to start than with food? Maggie Vespa, NBC.
And again, I thought that was pretty cool, especially the fact that, it's like, hey, we can show you how to eat without actually doing processed food while still preserving our native heritage. So I just thought that was pretty cool. But anyway, that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Before we do get out of here, some shameless plugging as usual. Shout out to my buddy Vaughn and Big BZA on all socials. Definitely check him out on his TikTok as well as his beat making and weird thoughts that he has, but sometimes funny. But definitely check him out there. Of course, guys, you can find me, BlackFox447, on all socials. Like and follow me as I usually post everything that I watch or play and review, and sometimes gym stuff because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, the link that you see at the bottom, I'll just make that a little bit bigger. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, we'll take you to my link tree. That's the YouTube, Facebook groups for all my podcasts, How the Frack Got Here, Get Bit, and of course, the Office Podcast. Definitely like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think of the show. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Well, things of that nature. Keep the world go around. I like to keep conversation going in that sense. That being said, guys, like I said, please take care of yourselves. COVID and its many Decepticons still out there. If you're going to be traveling, you're going through high traffic areas, please wear a mask. Please protect yourself. If you feel the least bit sick, please stay home. The only way we're going to get through this pandemic is to take care of ourselves, which helps us take care of others. Aside from that, guys, we will definitely be back for our weekend review this Saturday. But the last thing I'll say about How the Frack Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information allowing you to make up your own mind, but providing a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do better as society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first Black woman Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black 4-star military general. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all get through this. Peace.